I've been a pastor now for 8 years, but before that I spent 15 years in the business world. In fact, when I was a preacher's kid, I told myself I would never, ever, never, ever go into church work. So if you don't learn anything today, just don't tell God never. That's never a good idea, because here I am in church work. But one of the things I've found in communicating in church and communicating in the business world is there are a lot of similarities. A lot of the principles are the same. So when we were putting this conference together and when I was talking to Andy about it, he said, one of the guys we need to get to interview is Jeff Foxworthy, because he's brilliant in terms of how hard he works on his craft and on his stand-up routine. And people think that Jeff just stands up there and tells jokes, but it's very strategic. It's a lot of hard work. So I thought that was a brilliant idea. So I sat down with both Andy and Jeff Foxworthy to talk about how they do what they do, and what are some of the similarities that we can learn from Jeff and apply what Jeff does in comedy to the art and the craft of preaching. Hope you enjoyed it. Well, I'm so excited to be here with Jeff Foxworthy. When I first asked Jeff to do this, he said, okay, this is a preaching conference and you got preachers. I are not one.
I are not one, no.
But hey, thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
I mean, but one of the things we did talk about is there's so many similarities between what you do and what preachers do, believe it or not. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, and one of which is humor. It's just an undervalued tool for preachers, I think. And when it comes to humor, the thing with you, Jeff, is I pay a ticket, and you better make me laugh. So that there's that pressure there.
Yeah.
For preachers, I think people come in and think, okay, the preachers, we expect you to make me feel guilty. So humor for preachers is really this kind of disarming, engaging thing. But the challenge, and what I want to talk to you about a little bit, is how can preachers lean into humor? Where do you find your content? I mean, can you give us some tips and insights about how to find humor and then apply it into our messages?
I think there's a big place for humor in it. I mean, to me, humor is not taking yourself too seriously, which it is a good thing. I've always said that laughter was the release valve that kept the boiler from exploding. But when we don't take ourselves too seriously, it almost plays into who God wants us to be anyway. It's, okay, you're not in control, and you don't know everything. And so it's very similar. I mean, I've told Andy before, I said, you would have made a great stand-up. I'm thankful you're a preacher, but you would have made a great stand-up.
Right.
And for me, in finding that humor, I remember starting out, and probably like every other person that ever started as a comedian, I would watch commercials and I would look at billboards and I'd think, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? And one of the coolest blessings to me is very early on it struck me, hey, if I think something, or my wife says it, or my kids do it, I bet we're not the only ones. And I just trusted that. And so when I went out there and threw a thought out there, and then I remember one time preparing a set for Johnny Carson, and it was a whole men and women thing. And I said to my wife, I said, okay, here's one of the things I want to do. I said, I don't know how women can lie down on the couch and take a nap without sticking their hand in the top of their pants. And my wife said, if you say that, you're going to embarrass yourself, because I don't think every guy lays on the couch like that. And I thought, well, I do it. My brother does it. Surely we're not, And I went out on The Tonight Show, and I told that joke. And everybody laughed, and then every woman in the audience went to the guy next to her. And so it's like, yeah, I mean, and so that's always been my comedy. It's just to trust, hey, if I think this, and I think it applies for preachers.
Yeah.
If you're feeling that way, there's a lot of other people out there feeling that way.
Right. Well, there have been plenty of times when I've looked at one of my sermons on paper, and I feel like it's true, but it leans towards seriousness. And I think sometimes truth we tend to think has to lean towards seriousness. And I go, I got to have humor. I got to have something in here. The other part of that, though, is timing. I mean, you can have a joke or great content and not have good timing. So what have you learned about timing? What did you do? What do you do now that you've learned that you may not have done the first couple of years you were doing this?
Well, if you're going to be a comic for a living, I always tell people you can't teach somebody to be a comedian. You can't teach them to be funny. You can help them get better at it. Right. But it's like everybody's known somebody that was a great joke teller. And then you know people that are horrible joke tellers. Usually the ones that are good, they cut the fat. Do you know what I mean? And I'll give you an example, and I won't say the name, but I was listening to a sermon a few months ago, and a guy was trying to relate a personal story. But there were so many details in there that didn't need to be in there, that even though it was getting to the cute little payoff, it was way too long a road. And Leno, some of my favorite nights in comedy are sitting backstage at the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach and listening to Leno and Seinfeld and Shandling just dissect a joke, and to just trim it down to just the bare essentials, what you needed on it. And so when I'm writing comedy, that's what, as I write it out, when I go back and work on it, I'm never adding to it. I'm cutting away, and it's just getting it down. You know, if I'm telling a story about what happened to me at Starbucks, nobody needs to know that you only go to Starbucks on Wednesday afternoon and you like to go there and you like to get the car. It's like, I walked in a Starbucks, I saw my buddy.
And you're into it.
And you're into it.
Yeah.
And so, and you're getting down to the meat of what is funny. And I think, you know, what makes comedy work is you're walking somebody down a road and they think that they know where you're going, and then there at the last minute you turn 90 degrees, you know.
You talk about your note cards, you talk about writing a joke. Do you, again, I've just been fascinated with this. So is this like a legal pad? You're at your kitchen table and you're writing out, or is it, how do you do that? Because we have a lot of preachers watching this. They do different things. Some of them computer, some legal pad. I mean, how do you do this?
Well, it usually starts with the note cards. Like I'll give you an idea. The latest one, I wrote it yesterday, was the thought, I'm behind a car out on 141, and it's got 15 bumper stickers on the back. And so I pull out the note card at the red light, and I said, the number of bumper stickers on a car is directly proportional to how crazy the person is that's driving the car. I don't even know if that's funny or not, but I've just kind of noticed in my life, the more bumper stickers you got, the bigger the nut is driving the car. And so then I have this thoughts, and then I try it on people. I don't just take that to the stage, and I usually try it on my wife and then my brother. But I work it into conversations. If I was hanging out with you today, I would say, hey, have you ever noticed that? Well, if that makes you laugh, then I think, okay, there's something there. And I'll try it on somebody else, and there's something there. Then it's always the yellow notepad. And then I'm thinking, okay, what context can I convey this in? And the thing that I'm working on with it now is a new bit I'm trying to create called The Facts of Life. Has nothing to do with sex or the TV show. The Facts of Life is, I'm 53 years old, and here's things I've learned to be true. The number of bumper stickers on the back of a car is proportional to the, you know, nobody thinks your kids and your dogs are as cute as you do. I mean, there's facts of life that you learn, and so then I try to work it into that. That's kind of the process for me, and I learned an exercise early on it, which would probably help preachers, but if you're trying to put, hey, how do men do this? I would always take a notepad. If it was, how do men clean the house? And I would list every attribute I could think of a man. And then I would list on the other side every attribute I could think of cleaning a house, whether it was vacuuming, doing clothes, ironing. And then I would start, like men love to drive, and then you would have a vacuum cleaner. And then it's like, okay, what if you had a 4-wheel drive vacuum cleaner that a guy could, and it was just trying to mix things that normally didn't go together.
Right.
So that was a great little thing, and it works.
But this is something that's in the future, right? I guess the question would be.
Yeah, this I'm working on now. I mean, but it probably won't be stage ready for several months.
See, that's a huge point, because I think when it comes to content development, or when do you develop your content? Always.
You know,
wouldn't that be correct?
And that used to be the thing. Even I remember when we started doing the Blue Collar Comedy Tour. Well, I'd already done 8 or 9 albums by that point and 3 or 4 HBO specials. But for, like Larry the Cable Guy, I would say to him, if this hits, you better be writing like crazy, because once these people, and that's this is the downside of comedy. I say to my musician friends, if you write 5 hit songs, you can play till you're 90. Because no matter where you go, people want to hear those 5 songs. If I do an HBO special, people go, ha, heard it. Want to hear the new stuff.
Right.
So you're always having to reload. So when do I write? I'm always writing. I'm writing every day, you know, and so it's just kind of like always putting more meat into the grinder there. And as you're using it up, you got something else coming along. And so I would say to a preacher, if you have a thought, write it down. I mean, if it's the bumper stickers on the car, write it down, because there's going to be somewhere where you're trying to create a message that's going to fit, that's going to attach to that. And I think sermons it's probably like comedy. When you tell one thing well, take a simple thing and tell it well. Because I think that's the message of Jesus. That's what Billy Graham did. He never made it complicated. It was very simple, but he told it very well.
And simple connects.
And simple connects. I mean, we're simple people, you know? I mean, you know, somebody said to me about the redneck jokes one time. They said, well, you're playing to the lowest common denominator. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm playing to the most common denominator.
That's good.
It's because what I had found in going everywhere was when you got 10 minutes outside of any city, people were the same. They were rednecks in California, and they were in Washington State, and they were in Illinois, and they were in Florida, and that's why it worked.
Yeah. One of the things when it comes to the church, as you well know, men over the last many years, I guess, have left the church. But men are in your audience. So you're talking to thousands of pastors out there. How can we reach the heart of men? Because you know, I look at when I've seen you live, when I see your shows, there's a lot of men out there. You know how to draw and attract men. Is there something there, again, and we've touched a little bit on this, but is there something there that as pastors and preachers would allow us to capture men?
Yeah, wow, because I haven't given this any thought.
I didn't send that to you last night.
No,
that's just on the fly there.
But
so.
you know what I think? I think Christian men have for way too long been portrayed as goody-goody sissies. And I think guys go, I don't want to be that. I used to think that about them. It's like, oh, those are the do-gooders. And and I was telling my guys down at the mission last week, I said, it's kind of easy to accept Jesus taking the beating and being on a cross if you make him fully God. But if you make him fully man too, and you think about that whip with the pieces of bone and the pieces of metal in him, cutting him open, and the thorns jabbed in his head and people spitting on him and taking the nails, if you make him fully man, there ain't nothing sissy about this.
Right.
He was a man. I mean, he was a man. There ain't nothing sissy about it. When you choose to step out in this and kind of lay down your life for other people, it's not for sissies. And I think that's why I like it so much now. Is you're volunteering to hold other people's rocks. Sissies don't do that.
Right.
You know?
Well, final question. We got thousands of preachers and pastors
Okay, now you
watching,
just made me
so,
nervous. I wasn't nervous until then. I get nervous in a room full of preachers.
Well, you've already given us great advice. So, but is there anything else you want to share with us? Just, you know, as a guy like me, you know, we both kind of grew up in the church, so you've heard thousands of sermons.
You know what? I would encourage people to be inviting, to be vulnerable, to admit you don't have it all figured out, but to be inviting and to let them know that this is a way of being loved. They've never been loved before. And you know, I used to think about, all right, well, coming to Christ, I got my ticket punched. I got when I die, I got my ticket, I'm going on. But when Jesus talked about having life to the full, I mean, that starts today. That starts today. And it involves being able to laugh, laughing at yourself, laughing at your buddies when they're goofy. It involves holding other people's rocks. That's life to the full. You know, people will ask my wife sometimes, is he always funny? And she goes, nobody's always funny. Is he funny? Yeah, he's funny. But he also cries and he also gets mad sometimes. And it's the full range of human emotions. But the life to the full is a good thing. And it involves everything, but part of it does involve laughter.
Wow. Well, hey, as a fan and as an admirer, thanks for doing this. I know you're busy. He was out of town just the other day and flew back for this, so thank you. I really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
God bless.
Every day, he says.